Let's get to energy prices and the global market reaction to President Biden's decision to release oil from reserves in coordination with other countries. Brian Sullivan joins us for this. And Brian, this is the first time we've seen a coordinated release of the SPR with other countries. It's the first time that it's been released in this manner, too, right? Or for this reason.
Yeah. First coordinated release in a non-sort of war-like situation. They had the Libyan civil war back in 2011 where some countries got on board. But, Becky, this is not only the biggest SPR release ever, it is the coordinated non-emergency first one, to your point, ever. But it's also designed to do something I think that the SPR has never been talked about doing, which is to lower prices. And people say, why didn't this lower oil? They're down a little bit now, but they rose yesterday. Why didn't this lower prices? Well, I would argue two things. Number one, it kind of did. Oil prices fell $8 a barrel heading into it, mostly on jawboning about releasing the SPR. But also, I think it's important to note the SPR was not there to lower prices. It has never been used as a mechanism to drive prices down. The SPR is there, all this sludgy oil stuck in the salt caves of Louisiana and Texas in case there's a hurricane. I don't know if we have it. We had a wall graphic up on WEX where we showed all the times that we've had a sale or a swap from the SPR, and it's, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ivan, Hurricane Ida, Hurricane Gustav. You had the Libyan Civil War, and, of course, you had the Iraq War in 1991. That's it. In fact, I didn't even know what to call it when I, was framing it. It's not a hurricane. It's not a war, Becky. So what do we call this release? Either way, really, it's 50 million is the headline, but 18 of that was already prescribed in a sale. So 32 million new barrels. And it's important to note, those barrels are going to be swaps. They're exchanges. In other words, they're not selling oil to the highest bidder. That's a sale. This is a swap. They're going to give it to, say, an Exxon, a Chevron, a Valero. I'm making the names up because we don't know yet who's going to get it. And then those oil firms will return the oil at some date, ostensibly when it's cheaper, hopefully, with extra barrels, kind of like interest. Now, whether or not that occurs, at what time, we're going to find out. I spent all yesterday, as you might imagine, texting and talking to oil executives, CEOs, whatever. They all kind of told me, Becky, they're a little bit confused because the president wants higher oil production, but the same day you had a letter from the FTC sent basically saying, sort of threatening action and asking for prices. Elizabeth Warren sending that letter. I got a copy of the letter, by the way, last night, asking all these questions. They feel like they're sort of under the gun on one hand, but then they're also being asked to sort of be the good guys and pump more oil on the other hand. And now they kind of have to compete with some of this SPR. So there is a lot going on in the oil markets. It didn't lower prices. It may in the future, and it kind of did, I think, to begin with. But the SPR was not designed to lower prices. Also, by the way, it should be noted, a lot of the oil in the SPR, Becky, is kind of heavy, sour, sludgy stuff. That's about 2/3 of it. So it may not even be the oil that American producers want. Bloomberg and others reported, and they ended up taking the story down, but I talked to people elsewhere afterwards, that some of this oil may be sold overseas because it's a better type of oil for a refiner that doesn't have our discerning tastes when it comes to the light, sweet stuff.
Ask why we bothered to fill 600 million barrels of oil that we don't particularly like. Why didn't we use the light, sweet stuff?
Well, I think, I don't know if you guys at home in the quick household have a gallon of gas or whatever. I've got a 5-gallon racing jug of gasoline that I've kind of kept around. I mostly use it for like lawnmowers and stuff, but the gas is probably rotten at this point. But I always had it when I had a generator because I thought, well, if I ever needed something worst case, I'll have some gas. But gasoline goes bad. I probably shouldn't pour that into anything. The SPR is there, and I bring that up because the SPR is kind of the same way. It's oil that is literally sitting, when I said salt caves, I'm not kidding, actually in caves in the ground. It gets messy, it gets dirty, but it will work if there's nothing else. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve is just that. You don't want to use it. You don't want to have to need it. But it's there as kind of a last refuge.
Last resort.
Refuge, yeah, if you will, to keep the refineries going.